the past 2 decades, China has significantly expanded its infrastructure projects across nearly every African country. This involvement includes massive investments in roads, railways, ports, and other critical infrastructure, amounting to over $140 billion in loans for various projects. As of 2020, around 49 African countries had signed agreements under China's Belt and Road Initiative, highlighting the extensive reach of these projects. China-Africa trade surged from $11.67 billion in 2000 to $257.67 billion in 2022, making China the leading trading partner for many African countries, surpassing traditional partners like the United Kingdom and the United States. Chinese FDI flows to Africa rose from $75 million in 2003 to a peak of $5 billion in 2021. Western critics popularized the term debt trap diplomacy to describe China's strategy. This term suggests that China provides loans for infrastructure projects that recipient countries cannot afford to repay, ultimately allowing China to exert strategic control over these nations. Examples often cited include Zambia and Uganda. Zambia, for instance, is heavily indebted to China, with approximately $5.05 billion owed, which is about 30% of its total external debt and roughly 20% of its GDP. In Uganda, there are fears that the Entebbe International Airport could be taken over by China due to the terms of their loan agreements. Proponents argue that China's investments have brought significant infrastructure improvements and economic benefits to Africa. They note that many Chinese projects have created jobs, enhanced business opportunities, and facilitated connectivity. For instance, Chinese telecommunications company Huawei has expanded digital connectivity across 40 African countries. Furthermore, Chinese-built railways, like the one connecting Nairobi to Mombasa in Kenya, are seen as critical to boosting local economies. Critics from the West argue that these benefits are overshadowed by the long-term economic risks and the lack of transparency in Chinese loan agreements. They assert that the opacity and potentially exploitative nature of these loans can undermine the sovereignty and financial stability of African nations. In contrast, defenders of China's involvement highlight the historical context of Western colonialism and the ongoing need for infrastructure in Africa, which Western countries have not adequately addressed. They argue that labeling Chinese investments as debt trap diplomacy oversimplifies the complex economic relationships and the mutual benefits derived from these projects. In this video, we delve into the heart of China's relationship with Africa, investigating why many African countries favor partnerships with China over those with Western nations. Additionally, we discuss the initiatives by the European Union and the United States, Global Gateway and Build Back Better World, B3W, and how these compare to China's efforts. Let's start comparing the Western and Chinese strategies in Africa. Comparison of Western and Chinese approaches in Africa. The United States and Europe have traditionally focused on providing aid and social services in Africa, emphasizing humanitarian assistance, healthcare, education, and poverty alleviation. Western aid often includes conditions on governance, transparency, and human rights, potentially causing delays in fund disbursement. For example, Western donors have significantly supported health crises like HIV/AIDS and Ebola. In contrast, China's strategy in Africa has been heavily focused on building infrastructure. China has invested billions in constructing roads, railways, ports, and other critical infrastructure. This investment is part of the broader Belt and Road Initiative, BRI, which aims to enhance global trade routes and connectivity. As of 2020, around 49 African countries had signed up to the BRI, which underscores China's significant influence in the region. Chinese projects in Africa include the construction of the Mombasa-Nairobi standard gauge railway in Kenya and numerous other transportation and energy projects. China's approach is often characterized by a lack of political conditions, which can make its investments more appealing to African leaders who are weary of the conditionalities attached to Western aid. Now let's examine how African leaders view the approaches of both the West and China. Let's take a quick pause. Could you do us a favor? If you enjoy our content, please hit the like button. To help even more, leave your thoughts and feedback in the comments. Your engagement helps us grow. Thank you. African leaders' preferences. African leaders have expressed a preference for China's approach over the traditional Western aid model. They argue that infrastructure development is crucial for economic growth and development, and thus prefer partnerships that focus on trade and business over aid and charity. This sentiment is reflected in numerous statements and agreements that prioritize economic collaboration and infrastructure development with China. African leaders appreciate being treated as trade partners rather than aid recipients, which aligns with their aspirations for development through trade and infrastructure. Let's study the scale and impact of some recent projects undertaken by China. Kenya. The Mombasa-Nairobi Standard Gauge Railway, SGR, funded and constructed by China, significantly improved transportation efficiency in Kenya. The 480 kilometers railway, completed in 2017 at a cost of $3.8 billion, reduces travel time between Mombasa and Nairobi from over 10 hours to about 4.5 hours for passengers and less than 8 hours for freight. The project, primarily financed by China Exim Bank, has enhanced cargo transport capacity to 22 million tons annually and created around 25,000 jobs for Kenyans, contributing 1.5% to Kenya's GDP growth. Ethiopia. The Addis Ababa-Djibouti Railway, completed in 2016, spans 756 kilometers and connects Ethiopia's capital to the port of Djibouti. This $4 billion project, funded primarily by China, is the first modern electrified railway in East Africa. It has dramatically enhanced trade logistics for landlocked Ethiopia, cutting freight transportation time from over 3 days to less than 20 hours and reducing costs by at least 1/3. The railway has transported 9.5 million tons of goods and facilitated a 20% increase in port activity in Djibouti, contributing significantly to regional economic integration and development. Nigeria. The Abuja-Kaduna Railway, completed in 2016, spans 186 kilometers and connects Nigeria's capital, Abuja, with the commercial hub of Kaduna. This $876 million project, built by the China Civil Engineering Construction Corporation, CCSEC, has significantly enhanced regional connectivity and stimulated economic activities. It reduces travel time between the cities to just 1 hour for passenger trains, which can reach speeds of up to 250 kilometers per h and 1.5 hours for cargo trains. The railway has created around 4,000 jobs during construction and is expected to generate over 5,000 additional jobs in operation and maintenance. Now, it's the time to analyze the historical perspective of West and Africa relationship. Historical context. From the 1950s to the 1970s, many African countries gained independence from European colonial powers. During this period, Western countries, particularly the United States and European nations, through organizations like the International Monetary Fund, IMF, and the World Bank, provided significant funding for critical infrastructure projects across Africa. This support aimed to stabilize the newly independent nations and foster economic development. Examples of such infrastructure include transportation networks, educational institutions, and healthcare facilities constructed with Western assistance. However, by the 1960s and 1970s, the focus of Western investment shifted. The initial enthusiasm for funding large-scale infrastructure projects waned, and the Western approach increasingly emphasized aid and social services over infrastructure development. This shift left much of the legacy infrastructure, primarily built during the colonial period, in disrepair as former colonial governments reduced their financial support for maintenance and new developments. In contrast, China's engagement with Africa during this time was characterized by ideological and political support. In the 1960s, China actively supported African countries' struggles against imperialism and colonialism, promoting non-alignment and unity among African nations. Notable projects included the construction of the Tanzania-Zambia Railway, TAZARA, which was funded and built by China and symbolized China's commitment to African development free from colonial influence. Modern Chinese investments in Africa. Since the early 2000s, China has significantly increased its investments in Africa, a strategy aimed at expanding markets and political influence. This initiative leverages China's proficiency in delivering large-scale infrastructure projects quickly and affordably, making it an attractive partner for many African nations. China's approach is informed by its own developmental experiences and surplus capital, which aligns well with Africa's developmental needs. China-Africa trade has seen a meteoric rise from $11.67 billion in 2000 to $257.67 billion in 2022, establishing China as the leading trading partner for many African countries, surpassing traditional partners like the UK and the US. Chinese FDI flows to Africa increased from $75 million in 2003 to a peak of $5 billion in 2021, although they dropped to $1.8 billion in 2022. Notable investments include the purchase of a 20% stake in Standard Bank of South Africa by the Industrial and Commercial Bank of China, ICBC, in 2008. China has been involved in numerous infrastructure projects across Africa, including the construction of railways, highways, and power plants. These projects are often financed through loans and grants, forming part of larger financial commitments such as the $60 billion pledged by China at the 2015 Forum on China-Africa Cooperation. Chinese investments are predominantly concentrated in sectors such as mining, construction, and manufacturing. Between 2000 and 2022, 89% of Africa's exports to China consisted of primary commodities like oil, copper, and iron ore, while imports from China largely comprised manufactured goods such as electronics and textiles. From 2000 to 2022, Chinese lenders extended approximately $170.08 billion in loans to African countries, with significant portions directed towards the energy sector. Despite the large influx of capital, concerns about debt sustainability have been raised, particularly in countries like Angola, Ethiopia, and Zambia, which are among the largest borrowers. Hydropower projects in Ethiopia. The Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, GERD, is a landmark infrastructure project aimed at boosting Ethiopia's power generation capacity. Once completed, GERD will be Africa's largest hydroelectric dam, capable of generating over 6,000 MW of electricity annually, significantly enhancing the country's energy supply. The project, which began in 2011 and is now 94.6% complete, is expected to double Ethiopia's electricity generation, supporting industrial growth and improving energy access for millions of Ethiopians. The dam, with a construction cost of approximately $4.8 billion, includes a 145-meter-high dam with a 780-meter-long crest and a reservoir capacity of 74 billion cubic meters. This project not only aims to alleviate power shortages in Ethiopia, but also to enable the country to become a major power exporter in the region, potentially earning around $1 billion annually from electricity exports. Chinese companies have played a significant role in the construction and financing of GERD, highlighting the importance of international cooperation in such large-scale projects.
Welcome. If you like the content I produce in this channel, please like, comment, and share. Also, don't forget to subscribe for more news on geopolitics.